Hey guys, I'm on my way back to Texas. I'm in here with the van, with Big John. What's up, Big John?
How's it going, y'all?
We're gonna try and amplify this audio before we upload it. But we're here to talk about this book. I promised you guys we were gonna talk about this book because before Zecharia Sitchin ever came out with the Earth Chronicles, before my hero, David Hatcher Childress, ever published any books in his Lost City section, and before a whole host of authors in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and thousands released all their modern books on the ancient world, before any of that, this man here had already researched many old texts and books in the 1960s. His source materials are a lot like mine. He goes back to the old books and old materials. What you're going to hear in this video is going to blow your mind. Many of the things I've told you about that are in David Hatcher Childress' books, the stuff that Zecharia Sitchin actually got right, and many other authors, they're right here. It's in this book. This man published it before all of them. And yet, you don't even know his name. Why is that? Yeah, guys. Andrew Thomas. We are not the first. The title implies we are not the first technologically advanced civilization. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get started. This is the title page for We Are Not the First. This is it right here. I'm going to read the back real quick. Penicillin in Egypt thousands of years ago, blood transfusions among primitive Australian aborigines, mysterious and startling accurate maps of the globe long before Columbus, atomic theory among the ancients, mind-boggling revelations on the walls of prehistoric caves. We're going to get to the bottom of this, guys. We're going to see what Andrew Thomas had discovered long before we ever heard the name of Zecharia Sitchin and David Hatcher Childress. And many others too. I'm just naming those two. But he starts off with, during the past 300 or 400 years, science has been rediscovered rather than discovered. Babylon, India, Egypt, Greece, and China were the cradle of science. The old devices have been reinvented. The old experiments have been tried once more, said Alexander Graham Bell. That's a quote from the man who invented the telegraph, or actually invented the telephone, according to the history books. This book is about penicillin before Fleming. It is about airplanes before the Wright brothers. It is about the moons of Jupiter being discovered before Galileo. It is about voyages to the moon before the Apollo probes. It is about atomic theory centuries before Rutherford. It is about electric batteries before Volta. About computers before Weiner. About science before the Science Age. That's pretty profound. What you think about that, John?
I've kind of always looked at science as a form of rediscovery rather than invention.
Okay.
So it's not surprising that here in the last 40 years or so, 50 years, that people are starting to kind of catch on to stuff like that.
I get that. I'm going to give you some examples straight out of this book of how the world of old was not much different than the world of today. So Andrew goes on and says, on page 16, chapter 2, Novelties in Antiquity, he says that the city of Pompeii in Italy actually used arm-waving traffic policemen to cope with the population and congestion. Pompeii and Vesuvius had street signs, and the same street signs that were found 2,000 years earlier in Babylon. Not much has changed. We got traffic cops today and street signs. In the ancient Assyrian ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists in Assyria have found no parking signs were displayed in front of temples and government buildings. You couldn't put your wagon or chariot or horse in front of them. You couldn't park. Ain't no different than today. Go to Houston. You'll see no parking signs everywhere. They also had royal road signs, let no man obstruct it. So the rules back then were you could travel on a royal road. You could even have your wagon, cart, merchandise, whatever. But as soon as dignitaries or royal members or somebody who had authorization to use the road was on it, you better get your ass off of it because they weren't playing no games. And then you could get right back on it as soon as they passed. Hell yeah. We got that today. Go to any real high prestige nightclub. See if you can walk straight through the door. You know what I mean? It ain't gonna happen. The ancient city of Antioch was the site of the first street lights known in history. There may be other cities, but archaeologists haven't found them. But at Antioch in Syria, the cradle of Christianity itself, which, you know, Antioch is far older than Christianity, but it's where Christianity began. And archaeologists have found streetlights there. Also, in the Americas, the Aztecs set a permanent colored strip directly into the paved road of the Aztecs had long roads. And what archaeologists have found is that these painted stripes that we have to differentiate between lanes of traffic, the Aztecs were already doing that. They painted their roads to show that you had one-way traffic this way and reverse traffic the other way. It's crazy. Not much has changed. An engineer of Alexandria named Heron built a steam engine which embodied the principles of both the turbine and jet propulsion. What? Dude, guys, this is 2,200 years ago. If it were not for the repeated burnings of the Alexandrian library, we might have had a story about the steam chariot in ancient Egypt. At least we do know that Heron invented a speedometer registering the distance traveled by a vehicle. That's amazing. Now, we're going to get into it later in this book. There's even pictures of it, but engineering was not unknown 2,000 years ago. Guys, remember in 1901, the public was informed that a computer was found in the shipwreck ruins off Antiquity in the Mediterranean. It's now known as the Antiquity computer, and it's a differential geared mechanism of extreme sophistication. In fact, the level of technology required to make the Antiquity computer was far more advanced than the Antiquity computer itself. And that's saying something. You guys have to refer to my earlier videos about the Antiquity computer. It's absolutely an astonishing piece of engineering. Found in a shipwreck ruins off the Isle of Crete. So Andrew goes on in giving some more examples. He says, the prehistoric city of Catalhoyuk in Turkey has pieces of carpet that have been found by archaeologists spread throughout the ruins of so high quality that they compare favorably with the most beautiful carpets woven today. Guys, these are 5,000-year-old ruins. So, that's just absolutely amazing. The beautiful bust, this is the head, of the Sumerian queen Shubad, displayed in the British Museum, shows that long time ago, people were much like us. This lovely young lady wears an amazingly modern wig, large earrings, and a necklace. The sophisticated girl who used cosmetics, a wig, expensive jewelry, and she died in a ritual suicide around the year 2900 BC. This is 49 centuries ago. That's amazing. This is 21 centuries before the founding of Rome. That's just unbelievable. Nothing has changed, guys. Nothing has changed. You You guys know in my prior videos, I cited the Sumerian text, poems that sound just like pieces of literature today. Yeah, technologies change, culture changes, linguistics change, but human nature does not change. We still hate, we still rage, we still love, we still have compassion. Yeah, it's human nature doesn't change, guys. No matter what the civilization. So Andrew goes on and says, for some reason the workmanship level of jewelry, as well as the architecture of ancient Egypt, was of a higher sophistication in the earliest periods. The rings and necklaces, earrings, diadems, the crowns of the 5th and 12th dynasties, they all displayed in the Cairo Museum, in the Metropolitan Museum of New York. They are all perfectly made and far more beautiful and made with a higher technology than later Egyptian dynasties. Why is this, guys? Among the pyramids in Egypt, the first structures, the oldest pyramids, are of superior workmanship. The wave of progress, now get this, guys, the wave of progress markedly starts downward in Egypt about 1600 BC. I have to, listen, my Archaix veterans, you guys already know what Andrew Tomas is talking about. He's talking about the mysterious second intermediate period of ancient Egypt. Now, Egyptologists don't like to associate Egyptian history with any other histories around the world. So they tell us of the first intermediate period, and they give us a general date for that period. What they're not telling you is that was a reset. In general archaeology, as I have shown, the first intermediate period goes with a period during the vapor canopy when there was a dark age, there was a cataclysm, it was a phoenix holocaust, it was terrible. But in Egypt, because now they switched over from the old ossuaries and they switched over from the old pyramid coffin text to the pyramid text, and then later to the wall text, we have a degeneration of hieroglyphics. We have a degeneration of building methods. That was the first intermediate period. But the second intermediate period, every single Bronze Age civilization in the world collapsed. Anybody can verify this. W.J. Perry wrote a whole book about it called Children of the Sun, which is 551 pages. In this 551-page book, he documents that every Bronze Age civilization collapsed at about 1688 BC. That's an approximate, but it's a scientific bullseye for the Phoenix phenomenon that destroyed the entire world in the month of May in 1687 BC and started a dark age. That's exactly what he says right here. He says all this. He says jewelry. He says crypts. He says all the technology, engineering, and architecture of Egypt. Suddenly, progress stopped. And everything shows a marked contrast going downward after about 1600 BC. That's the Phoenix phenomenon, guys. It destroyed all of Egypt. I've got several videos about that, and I've mentioned it many times in my published books. Andrew Tomas doesn't know anything about the Phoenix phenomenon. He knows nothing about the 138-year reset periodicity, and yet he nailed it right here in this book. It's awesome. What you think about that, John?
So, what I'm inferring from this is that we had like in Egypt an advanced civilization that was reset, and then the civilization that came after this reset were just trying to like emulate the what was left behind, what was still there after the reset.
Yeah, they did, and
they weren't able to do I guess as good of a job.
Yep.
So that's why there's that big change in the quality of before and after the reset.
It's just like if Texas got destroyed, me and you survived. You and I know how to do some basic skills, but we've lost all the infrastructure to be able to.
Yeah, I'm no engineer. I could build a house, but it's not going to be real nice.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay.
That's exactly what happened. There's nothing even mysterious about it. Andrew Tomas just gave us another data point on the Phoenix phenomenon for 1687 BC. I've got hundreds of them, but it's nice to see that he's found research, without even knowing about the Phoenix phenomenon, he's found research showing what these other ancient and older authors all said about that period. And Egyptologists, they cover it up. They don't tell you about the vast destruction. All they do is admit, yeah, we don't know why, but it seems like they couldn't build pyramids good anymore. They couldn't build temples good anymore. They couldn't make food good anymore. Couldn't grow anything good anymore. It seems like they lost the technology for husbandry for animals. They lost a lot of their livestock. We don't understand why all the fleets disappeared and the fisheries disappeared. We don't understand why all the canals weren't kept up for 200 years. And we don't understand all that, so we're going to call that the second intermediate period. So I'm going to tell you what the first one was. The first Egyptian intermediate period was the collapse of the vapor canopy. In the Bible, you know that of as a great flood. In the Norse traditions, you know that as the day the sky fell. So, ain't that right, my Viking brother?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's move on, guys. We got a lot of ground to cover. So, Andrew Tomas goes on and talks about Mohenjo-Daro in Pakistan, India. Now, I've talked about those two guys. You know about the radioactive skeletons that have been found. The Russian scientists found radioactive skeletons that are 50 times more radioactive than skeletons are supposed to be that were found at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Now, I'm not trying to promote any type of controversy. I understand some of you guys have a problem with that World War II narrative, and you think those were Moabs that were dropped and not actually atomic bombs. I get that, because those cities are thriving today and they've already rebuilt and all that. I don't know. I don't care. I'm just saying that the Russians actually excavated skeletons holding hands, mothers and children, thousands of people all standing in the streets, and even thousands of years later, those skeletons were untouched and unmoved. And it's very remarkable that after this destruction that laid all these humans out in these ruins, their bodies were not messed with wild animals, carrion creatures. That's very telling. That means all the animals died too. Now, or the area was just too radioactive. So Tomas goes on and provides a really interesting deal that I don't remember reading before. I read this book in prison. I do not remember reading this, or maybe it wasn't important to me at the time. The reason I go through a lot of these older books with you guys, even though I've already gone through them in the past, is because I was looking at things from a purely Christian perspective back then. Listen, guys, at heart, my morals, the architecture of my spiritual personality, I'm still Christian at heart, even though I don't believe the story was real. I don't believe that a spiritual God would require a physical crucifixion. I believe everything is metaphor, everything is spiritual. And this is why the greatest spiritual teachings that we have ever received come in the form of pantomime, stage plays. This is why the whole gospel of Jesus reads just like a Greek stage play with an amphitheater, and every scene is very vivid with descriptions and quick narratives, and real life isn't like that. Real life wouldn't have unfolded with the conversations that you find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, scene from scene. They would have never been able to travel the distances for all those people in those short periods of time and compress that, because we're told all that happened in 3 years. And then the whole passion story happened in 3 days, and it's impossible, guys. Roman law would have never allowed a man to be crucified like that. There was other death sentences that he could be given, but crucifixion mandated that the appeal had to go to Rome, and it took 16 days to sail to Rome. Then it took 16 days to get an answer from Rome. And there's no way anybody would have ever, Pontius Pilate would have never allowed himself to be crucified in the place of Jesus, which Roman law would have mandated if he would have allowed somebody to be crucified without getting approval from the Senate.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, is that Pontius Pilate, the position that he held within Rome, he did not have the authority to crucify anyone, because crucifixion was something that was reserved for the most horrible of crimes. It was like the death of deaths, right?
That's right. That's
so,
right.
Like, he wouldn't have had the authority.
Crucifixion was rare.
He would have had to gain the authority from Rome. Like you said, it's 16 days one way.
Yep.
So
never happened. It would have never happened like that. This is why they invented the story of Pontius Pilate washing his hands. They knew Roman law, and they knew the public wouldn't accept that. The story doesn't make sense. So they have the story. They invented that. It's called an interpolation. They put a scene in there where Pontius Pilate washes his hands. That doesn't absolve you from Roman law. You're still under Roman law. That's just a gesture, washing your hands of the whole scenario. So, knowing that it doesn't absolve you made the Roman Catholic Church invent another story. And that story is called the Gospel of Pontius Pilate, or the testimony of Pontius Pilate before Caesar. See, they had to clean up their act. The story didn't make sense initially, so they invented new apocryphal texts to add more to the story in order to explain away the things that an actual trier of fact living in those days would have known could never have happened. So yeah, Pontius Pilate was killed in Rome for his participation in the execution of Caesar. For those of you who don't know, it's called the testimony of Pontius Pilate before Roman Caesar. But all biblical scholars who have studied that text, they know for a fact it is a forgery. It is a text that is not original. It was invented by the church, just like the donation of Constantine. But it's not even the subject matter of this book. That's just one of my irrelevant tangents. So
you're good at those.
I'm good at those. Andrew Tomas goes off and says, hey, 2 Roman ships found in the 1920s in the bottom of Lake Nemi in Italy were restored in major projects between 1927 and 1932. These Roman vessels were large and wide, and they had 4 rows of oars. That's huge! Get this. There were accommodations on each ship for 120 passengers in 30 cabins with 4 berths each, as well as quarters for the crew. The boats were richly decorated with mosaic floors depicting scenes from the Iliad, walls of cypress paneling, paintings in the lounge, and a full library in each ship. A sundial in the ceiling showed the time, and it is thought that a small orchestra even entertained the passengers in the salon. The stern contained a large restaurant and a kitchen. Guys, this is a Roman cruise ship. The passengers enjoyed freshly baked bread for their breakfast, and the menus of the meals must have been comparable with the richness of the dining room decorations. Certain finds came as a complete surprise to the archaeologist. Copper heaters provided hot water for baths, and the plumbing was absolutely modern, equal to the plumbing in the 1920s. Particularly the bronze pipes and the taps. They had swivel taps like we have today. Guys, it's 2023. And in Willis, Texas, I can go straight to Ace Hardware store and I can go buy a brass swivel top tap. I'm pretty sure you can do that in Splendora too, can't you?
Yeah, guaranteed. The local hardware store.
Hell yeah. It's no different, guys. We're talking about 2,000-year-old Roman cruise ships that held 120 passengers between 30 luxurious rooms, and then a bunch of rooms for the crew, and kitchens and dining rooms and libraries. Oh my God, not much has changed. Now, Andrew Tomas makes a good point. He says 200 years ago, porcelain toilets were almost unknown in the world. 200 years ago. And yet 4,000 years ago, the Minoan ruins of Crete and the Palace of Knossos all had porcelain toilets. What do you think about that?
I think that not much has changed if they had porcelain toilets.
4,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Remember, it was a reset cataclysm 1447 BC that destroyed the Minoan Empire. It's what gave rise to the Mycenaean Empire. And then the Mycenaean Empire, they filled the power vacuum, but it caused too many problems on the open Black Sea trade routes. The Hittites were blocking the port to the Dardanelles, and this started a trade war. This is the backstory to the story of Atlantis that I've told you guys about in my videos. Now, the people that ended all that were the Atlanteans, the Sea People's Federation. They came in and destroyed all that. They broke all that bullshit up, destroyed the Hittites, invaded Egypt twice, destroyed the Ilium and Troy and all that. And the Atlanteans' royal sigil was a horse. Trojan, y'all know the story of the Trojan War. Let's see. In the House of the Four Styles, in the ruins of Pompeii, an ivory statuette of the Indian goddess Lakshmi was discovered in 1938, which implied that commercial and cultural ties with India must have been maintained by Rome before Mount Vesuvius had buried this artifact in the year 79 AD. That's interesting. So the author, Andrew Thomas, says that he has traveled Italy and Madras, and he has traveled India. He says, quote, if, as the author has, you have traveled and seen the shops of Madras and Bombay full of colorful saris, or saris, I don't know how you say it, you may be surprised to find out that during the reign of Vespasian and Diocletian, this is less than 2,000 years ago, from India were on sale. These same articles were on sale in India, meaning these beautiful articles of clothing that were made by the ancient people of India are still made today. Andrew Thomas went to India and saw them for himself. But only the very rich could afford them. For silks, brocades, muslins, and cloth of gold are bought in India. They are brought to Rome, remitted annually a considerable sum in trade, equivalent to $40 million. That's how much has been found in ancient Roman ruins. $40 million of merchandise has been found by archaeologists spread throughout the Roman provinces and Italy proper. $40 million worth that all came from ancient India. The reason this is important, guys, is because establishment archaeology is always trying to say that their diffusion theory is not true. And they're always trying to say that there wasn't widespread trade. This is why they were always trying to attack the Marco Polo story. And why Marco Polo and his uncle had to actually produce a bag full of gemstones as proof that they had been to Bombay in India and even made it to China, because the gemstones they brought back are only native to the East. They cannot be found in Europe. So, you familiar with the story of Marco Polo?
So, not what you're saying, no. Yeah, my understanding of Marco Polo is very, what do you call it, uniformitarian?
No, yours would be more establishment history.
Establishment history.
But we're going to get into it. We're going to get into Marco Polo. We got a video coming about Marco Polo because Big John needs to know about Marco Polo. So that means I got to put a video out. Because if Big John doesn't know about Marco Polo and he knows history pretty good, then I promise you there's some of you going to need to know about that too. Ain't that right?
That's true.
There you go. Silk was produced in China since the year 2640 BC. That's amazing. Why 2640? 2647 BC was a Phoenix reset during the vapor canopy. Why 2640? So 7 years after that reset, somebody invented how to produce silk from the silkworm? Or is this more evidence of a post-reset rediscovery of an older technique? I don't know. I'm asking you guys. I don't know.
Or was it something like there was small sects of people that made it through the reset that kept that technology with them, and then it became widely used again after the reset?
That's another scenario. Absolutely, another scenario. I find, as a chronologist, I find the dating way too precise. That silk suddenly appears 7 years after a Phoenix reset.
And you say it all the time, like whenever it's within a certain amount of time from make discoveries within a certain amount of time, like close to a Phoenix reset, like that's almost like a scientific bullseye.
Exactly. Scientific bullseye, absolutely. That is. 28 minutes into this video, we haven't even got started. Let's do it. The last example he provides in this chapter, he says no race had ever built 5,000 kilometer long highways like the ancient Peruvians did, the pre-Inca period, the Aymara. These highways cross canyons, and they even pierce mountains with tunnels that are still in use today. No primitive people did that, guys. Just the act of surveying and keeping your highways not only level with a really good tolerance, but also intact after thousands of years and in a straight line, guys, that's not easy to do. No primitive culture could have ever done that. And to even bore, tunnel through solid mountains, granite, diorite, rhyolite, you can't get through that stuff with primitive technology. Listen, guys, it ain't like the Egyptologists tell you, a bunch of sandal-wearing primitives out there with copper chisels and hammers beating on limestone. No, guys, that shit don't work anymore.
You can't just dig through a mountain.
No, you can't.
Take primitive tools and just dig through a mountain.
Hell no.
You have to know about the stone that you're digging into.
Damn right.
You have to know whether or not, if I dig into this, even with an arch, is this going to be able to hold the weight, that is distributed over this arch?
I get that.
Some stone can, some can't.
Okay, John. So
was it just trial and error with these primitives, like digging through mountains?
Okay.
Probably not.
What qualifies you, John, to know so much about stone? What is it in your past? What is it in your past that allows you to know how difficult it is to deal with stone?
Well, I mean, we did start Paradise Rock Gardens together.
Did you hear that, guy? He and I worked Paradise Rock Gardens together. I'm going to tell you now, I have worked with stone. I have a website called ParadiseRockGardens.com where you can go see all our work. I'm going to tell you now, you're not digging tunnels through stone. Hell, it takes 2 men to even set a 130-pound flagstone. Yeah, I can carry it by myself, but I can't set it by myself. Big difference.
See, the thing is, you can dig through stone with primitive tools, but it takes advanced technology to know, like, the density and stuff. Like, you can't just trial and error that. Like, you dig far enough in, and then it collapses, and then what? You don't have a tunnel anymore. You have a big collapse, and a bunch of people dead. I don't believe that, even if you think about history the way that a lot of people do, is that they didn't value human life the same way that we do now and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's no one that, even if they were using slaves, they're not going to just throw slaves in something until it happens.
Yeah, hell no.
Because they had to pay for those slaves, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing.
If slaves were even used at all.
Exactly. So, yeah, like you're not going to just throw human death at something until it gets done, despite it collapsing over and over and over again. Like, you have to have some sort of advanced thinking, some sort of advanced knowledge of stone and its density and how it works to make these tunnels happen.
Absolutely. So now, we're going into this next chapter. This is not going to be John's favorite chapter, I promise you, because my brother John, we're going to give you a little context, guys. You guys know I'm a catastrophist. The Phoenix phenomenon mandates that I'm a catastrophist. There's only 2 schools of thought in scientific history. Only 2. Catastrophism and uniformitarianism. John has been educated under the establishment system of uniformitarianism. He has seen some flaws in it, but he still holds to it until it is proven otherwise. But then again, John hasn't gone through all the Archaix data either, and he will admit that. This chapter here, Alexander Tomas is addressing this issue. The name of this chapter is Discoveries Create Problems. we're going to see what those problems are right now, because catastrophism and uniformitarianism cannot both be true. Let's do it. All right. And we will get your feedback here in a minute, my brother.
Oh, no.
All right. So, Professor Luther Cressman of the University of Oregon came across 200 pairs of woven fiber sandals in the Lamos Cave in East Nevada. Guys, a lot of strange artifacts have been found in the ruinous Badlands and torturous landscape of Nevada. Are we still in Nevada now?
No, we're in Arizona.
We're in Arizona. Okay, we just came out of Nevada. Nevada, which has Meteor Crater. Nevada has what? Grand Canyon.
Oh, we literally just passed Meteor City.
Okay. Yeah. Nevada has a petrified forest. Listen, a lot of strange things. 6-fingered human skeletons have been found in Nevada. Smithsonian's been out here many times. All right. So, this Professor Cressman finds 200 pairs of woven fiber sandals, skillfully made by an expert. He says you can almost not tell them apart from anything of modern manufacture. That's how good these sandals are. But the problem is that these were radiocarbon dated. They were found underground in a cave. They dug them up from the dirt in a cave. They have been radiocarbon dated at 9,000 years old. But this isn't the real problem. These sandals are young indeed when compared with a shoe print discovered in a coal seam in the Fisher Canyon, Pershing County, also in the state of Nevada. The imprint of the sole of the sandal is so clear that you can see the strong threads are visible. The age of the footprint is estimated by scientists to be over 15 million years old. But man, the first hominids, according to a scientist, didn't appear until 13 million years ago. Or in other words, according to current opinion, primitive man appeared some 2 million years ago. He's talking about Cro-Magnon. But he only began to wear shoes 25,000 years ago. So whose footstep is fossilized in this 15 million year old strata? Because that's the date that uniformitarians gave that rock. Now, this is all going to be explained here in a minute. Dr. Chao Ming Shen made a similar discovery in the Gobi Desert in 1959. It was the perfect fossilized impression of a ribbed sole on sandstone and was calculated to be millions of years old. The Chinese expedition could not explain it. They just documented it. Then the Brandenburg rock paintings in Southwest Africa depict Bushmen together with white women. Their perfectly European profiles are painted with a light tint, and the hair is shown as red or yellow, and the girls wear jewelry and an elaborate headdress of shells and stones. The attractive young women carry bows and water bags on their chests. They are wearing shoes while the black indigenous Africans are not. Some archaeologists consider these young women to be brave travelers who came from Crete or Egypt 3,500 years ago. These are paintings inside African caves showing white females. However, there is something peculiar about these white girls. That's Andrew Thomas, 1971. That's exactly how he said it. There is something peculiar about these white girls. They look like Caspians from North Africa who lived in the area 12,000 years ago. Both have those same long necks and long torsos, bows, headdresses, and garter-like crossbands along their legs. These are similar to the White Lady of Brandenburg, studied by Ab Henry Bruhl. A masterpiece. So, another problem that is isolated by Andrew Thomas was documented by Professor Denis Sarrat of France, who identified the heads of animals in the calendar of Tiwanaku in South America as those of toxodons, prehistoric animals which lived, according to the uniformitarians, in the tertiary period, many millions of years ago. Now, that's a problem, guys. But we've already found the same thing in Central America in the archaeological expeditions in 1911 and 12 by archaeologist Neville. Remember, guys, in Niven, they found spread out among the ruins of cities and pyramids in Mexico that are older than Tenochtitlan and the other Mexican pyramid cities. They found human skeletons, the ruins of architecture, and mastodons and three-toed sloth megafauna skeletons that showed that some of them were domesticated. They were using them as beasts of burden. How is that possible? So, A. Hyatt Verrill also notes that the cockle ceramics of Panama depict a flying lizard which looks very much like a pterodactyl that lived way before mankind came onto the scene. This creature lived 65 million years ago. So in 1924, the Doheny Scientific Expedition discovered in the Havai Supai Canyon in we just stayed at the Supai Motel. At the Supai Canyon in northern Arizona, a rock carving which looked amazingly like an extinct Tyrannosaurus Rex standing on its hind legs. In another rock image in Big Sandy River, Oregon, the prehistoric sculptor left a portrait of a perfectly anatomically correct Stegosaurus, a creature which lived before the appearance of mankind. Guys, in many of my presentations on YouTube, I've already shown you where there are many petroglyphs and cave paintings that show humans and prehistoric dinosaurs and stuff, but they aren't millions of years old. The other archaeological findings in the area show that they're only 4,500, showing that all these creatures lived in the vapor canopy world. It's like Land of the Lost, the show from the 70s and 80s, is true. These giant lizards and amphibians, they're not dinosaurs, they're gigantic amphibians and gigantic lizards. And the only reason they're not alive today is the vapor canopy collapsed. And it reduced the modern oxygen content to what it is today, 11%. We used to have 100% oxygen. We just take one single breath and then we can dive, and because the atmospheric pressure was so intense, it was so easy to take one breath and hold it, exhale, and then dive 250 feet all the way down to these rare clams that we can't reach today unless we have diving gear. But we found the shell middens from the ancient past that show that humans were diving at those depths to get those pearls. The vapor canopy answers all these questions, guys, especially with the dating, the uniformitarian dating. The sandal prints are not 200 million years old. They're not 15 million years old. Those sandals aren't even 15,000 years old. These imprints of boots and shoes that have been petrified and found, the uniformitarians have already, since the 1830s, 40s, and 50s, declared that certain strata are 65 million years old. But the things that we find in that strata are only 4,000 and 5,000 years old. So someone has made a mistake, and that mistake is only answered in catastrophism. But let's get back to some more examples.
I kind of always had a problem with that radiocarbon dating.
Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible.
Like I don't know. Seems like whenever you question it, years. Oh, well, you know, they give these long time periods that it could have been within.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, oh, it was 15 to 20,000 years ago. It's like, dude, that's 5,000 year variance.
Yes, it is.
Like, that's way too much.
That sounds like Graham Hancock.
Kind of.
Yeah, promoting 9,500 BC for the Atlantis narrative. Well, hell, there's 7,000 years before history even begins. And when I say history, I'm talking about recorded history, because you know, Archaix, we don't worry about anything before 5239 BC. We don't care, because we strictly go by the historically documented periods of time that we have documents, stelae, wall text, chrono markers from different monuments, archaeoastronomy. We have traditions, text, and actual chronologies, actual ancient texts, cuneiform. It doesn't matter. We don't go past 5239 BC. That's the Archaix data does. 5239 BC and after. And it's our position that these sandals and all this petrified shit and all that, fossilized jellyfish, all this is answered in catastrophism, in the Phoenix phenomenon. We don't have to go back. I'm not saying the world, and you guys know, I have never said the world is 5,000, goes back to 5,239 years. No, the Archaix paradigm begins then. That's our story begins then. What happened before that was somebody else's story, wasn't ours. Now, okay, so we're moving on. About 1920, Professor Giulio Tello found vases in the Nazca district near Pisco, Peru. He was struck by the discovery of the figures of llamas painted on the vessels, as the animals are shown with 5 toes. Guys, 5-toed llamas is anatomically correct. The problem is they don't exist anymore. We only have 2-toed llamas today. 5-toed llamas existed tens of thousands of years ago. They're extinct. They're a part of the megafauna, guys. Why aren't they here anymore? Oh, let me tell you something about the vapor canopy and how it collapsed. And all those megafauna couldn't breathe anymore because the oxygen lowered. Humans had to adapt. But it also made us live shorter lifespans. We weren't gigantic no more, so they didn't call us the Titans anymore. Within 200 years after the collapse of vapor canopy, humans started growing to the proportions that we find today. But in ancient times, during the vapor canopy, we were some big old SOBs. We were titans and giants. All right, let's move on. At the present time, the llama only has 2 toes, but in the earlier evolutionary stage, tens of thousands of years ago, llamas had 5 toes. That doesn't sound like evolution to me. It sounds like devolution. How would a primitive life form develop 5 toes and then all of a sudden reduce them to 2? It could have started with 2 from the beginning.
Well, it had to have been big. Like,
I don't know.
Typically, especially with animals, the more toes that it has, the more spread out its foot is. The more spread out its foot is, it's because of weight distribution. Okay. So if it lived during the vapor canopy, it was probably much bigger. It had 5 toes, and then the vapor canopy collapses, right? And it devolves the way that humans did. It gets smaller and smaller. It doesn't need as many toes, right? For the weight distribution.
I thought John was about to hit me with some uniformitarian wisdom, but instead he actually had provided a really good example of how the vapor canopy the absence of the vapor canopy completely caused not evolution or devolution, but something I talk to you guys about a lot. I don't believe in evolution. I don't believe in natural selection. I don't believe one species ever becomes another species. I believe 100% in genetic adaptation. Many species have branched off, and there's wide variety of lizards, but they're still lizards. There's a wide variety of turtles and tortoises, but they're still turtles. There's a wide variety of humans. Wide variety of humans. And there's many differences. It's not just skin color. There are many differences in the human family, a wide variety. But you know what? Every single one of us have Homo sapien sapien background. And every single one of us have the capacity to be intellectually elite, emotionally cogent. Yeah, there's no differences in our spirit. And as far as I can see, there's no differences in intellect to those who apply themselves. So yeah, but there's a lot of differences in race. Can I get an amen, or can I get an argument?
Well, no, I don't have an argument because it's already proven. Like, there's differences in things like bone density. There's differences in things that, like, diseases that we're susceptible to.
Oh yeah, like sickle cell anemia.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, African American women have the highest bone density, you know, of any race of people. So it's already shown that, like, there are what a uniformitarian would say are racial benefits through evolutionary benefits based on race, but we're also human, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like you said, genetically, we all still have that same DNA.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. We're 49 minutes into this video, and we haven't even got started. We haven't got started. See this?
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Man, there's so much good stuff in this book. All right. Again, Mr. Tomas, 1971, from the research in the 1960s. The discovery of megalithic sculptures at Archaix by Dr. Daniel Russo in 1952 is one of the momentous discoveries ever made in the Americas. 80 kilometers northeast of Lima, Peru, is a plateau at an altitude of 4,000 meters. What? 11,500 feet! Where the air is cold and hardly anything grows amidst the granite rocks. Standing in an amphitheater of rock, Russo found himself confronted by the enormous statues, faces cropped out of the rock, of animals and people. This is his exact words, guys. This is not my words. Caucasian, Negro, and Semitic faces looked at him. Lions, cows, elephants, camels, which had never lived in the Americas, surrounded Dr. Russo. He spotted, I can't pronounce this, guys, the Amphicalidae, an extinct ancestor of the turtle. That doesn't exist today. Known only by its fossilized remains. These are in ruins near Tiahuanaco, Peru, Lake Titicaca. Sculptures of the horse pose a burning question. Since the horse died out in the Americas, according to science, 9,000 years ago, this gives an approximate date of these ancient sculptures. I disagree. The disappearance of the horse is a uniformitarian dating, guys. They're talking about the Holocene, which we have no proof ever existed. The reason I disagree is because during the vapor canopy we had the existence of the megafauna, and the Holocene horse is a part of that genre of animals, giant mammalian life forms. The Holocene horse has been found everywhere, all throughout the Americas. So people who disbelieve the Atlantis story, sometimes they use that as evidence. Oh, the Sea People's Federation, you know, it couldn't have been the Atlanteans. They couldn't have come from America because there's no horses in America. You don't know that. In ancient American ruins, there's images of horses. There's images of elephants. There's images of lions. None of those exist in the Americas today. Just because they're not there today doesn't mean they weren't there 4,000 years ago. Okay. Any comments on that one?
No.
Let's see. Anyway, that's really interesting because I've already told you guys in prior presentations from the research of others that I've read, like David Hatcher Childress, we already know there were black people in Central America. Hell, for a while, for a while, there was a whole race war in Central America, and the blacks basically run out indigenous Olmecs, and I don't know what the situation is, but it's on the reliefs. And then they had local Caucasian artisans. They basically forced them to turn a bunch of those giant earthquake detection spheres that are found everywhere, this piezoelectric spheres, and they turned them into these giant angry faces. But they never did more than a dozen of them. They never had time, because the local indigenous American Indian cultures came back and executed vengeance. And the reliefs show black and Caucasian bodies in pieces, butchered. Yeah, the people came back and took those Olmec cities, and when they did, they just killed all the blacks and whites together. This is around 31 BC. This is a little over 2,050 years ago. Oh wow, that's the next example. The giant stone heads of the Olmecs found in La Venta, Trizapaltes, and other sites in Mexico are classified as artifacts of a similar type. Some of them are colossal heads of black basalt, 1.5 to 3 meters high, weighing from 5 to 40 tons. They are placed on stone basalt quarries. They're placed on stone stands, just like the globes. Remember, guys, and Alexander Tomas, man, this road is loud, isn't it?
Well, we switched from a very...
Can we get on that one?
I'm watching these trucks and they're kind of swerving around stuff. So,
oh, here it is. It smooths out.
Looks like it smooths out right here.
All right, cool. Hey, Route 66 is pathetic.
No, this is 40.
Oh, we're on 40 now. Well, both of them are.
Yeah, they both kind of suck.
Route 66 and I-40 are terrible. All right, you got potholes out here that should have manhole covers.
Yeah.
So anyway, Andrew Tomas doesn't know. He explains that the few giant heads they found that look African, and they are, they're black Central American, but they're on pedestals, the same pedestals that just the plain spheres are found. Those spheres are engineering wonders. Now, he mentions the pedestals because it's two different artifacts that are being found, but it's not two different artifacts. They're the same. The faces were the spheres. They were carved into faces during the occupation period when the blacks were in control. And the reason the other thousands of spheres were never carved into faces is because the blacks were in control for a very short period of time until that butchery happened. So Tomas says, let us put these stone heads aside and speak of real skulls, real human skulls. On the ground floor of the Museum of Natural History in London, a human skull is displayed. It comes from a cavern in northern Rhodesia and has a perfectly round hole on the left side. There are no radial marks. He says there are no radial marks or cracks, which are usually present if any injury is caused by a cold weapon. The right side of the skull is shattered. The skulls of soldiers killed by rifles today by bullets have identical appearance. A round, smooth hole on one side and an outward shattering of skull fragments on that side. The skull, okay, the cranium belongs to a man who, according to uniformitarians, lived 40,000 years ago at a time when no guns were being made that we know of. An arrow could have never produced such a perfectly round hole on the left inside of the skull and shattering the right outside of the right side of the skull. Arrow technology could have never done that. The paleontological The Paleontological Museum of the USSR has a skull of an auroch, which is hundreds of thousands of years old. This is an ancient, extinct ancestor of the bull. It shows a clear, round hole on the frontal part, and the scientific evidence has proved that although the skull was pierced, the brain was not pierced on the inside. The beast's wound healed, the bone knitted back together. In the distant past, what ape man was supposedly armed with such a precision rifle that could have made that hole? The question is, who shot the auroch? Now,
time travelers. No, I'm just joking.
I know you're joking. Now, what Alexander Tomas is doing is, here's a unique perspective. He's still a uniformitarian because he's applying uniformitarian dating and principles in this book. But this chapter is identifying the problems with uniformitarian dating. If you're going to put these impossibly ancient dates on stuff, why do you not modify those dates in the textbooks when you clearly find evidence of things that are only thousands of years old and not hundreds of millions of years old?
Yeah, like that's a problem. That's a problem for me. So when you find artifacts and you're saying that they're only a few thousand years old, and you are saying that they are in strata that is millions and millions of years old, you can't just then say these artifacts are now millions of years old.
Exactly. They don't rewrite the textbooks. Okay, we're going to move on to a real interesting one because it has everything to do with that firmament that's way up in the sky. All right. A meteorite of an unusual shape found near Eden, Colorado, created a scientific riddle. You know, scientists, they don't like riddles. An analysis by an American expert on meteorites, H.H. Nininger, indicated that the meteorite was composed of an alloy of copper, lead, and zinc, that is brass, which does not exist in nature at all. This is human manufacture. The meteorite could not have been space garbage because it fell in 1931. So you can't say it was a part of a satellite. You can't say it was a part of the space shuttle that burned up in the atmosphere. And you can't even say it was a part of the secret space program because it's 1931 when it fell out of the sky. And it's alloys that we now, in the 1980s, 90s, we now produce this, it's entirely man-made. So the question is, in 1931, what kind of space junk was up there at that date that fell from the sky? It isn't space junk. So that's a genuine mystery. You're not supposed to have space age technology prior to the space age falling from the sky. So a lot of people believe in the firmament, and the ancient the root words for firmament was that we're looking at an illusion in the sky, and behind that holography is supposed to be a solid. The Sumerians called it the hammered bracelet. The ancient Hebrews called it the firmament, and the word in Hebrew for firmament implies a hard crystalline structure. I don't know, guys. It's just very interesting.
So I have a question about that, actually. All right. Hitting the brakes, are you?
Yep.
So if they're claiming that it is something that fell from space, that is an alloy, all right, could it have just been a piece of something larger that had these three metals in it that superheated become an alloy? Because isn't that how an alloy is kind of made? Is that it is heated up, and it's a heated up blend of different metals. So couldn't that have occurred naturally in space?
The scientific problem with that is that most of your alloys they are absolutely numeric specific to the proportion. If there isn't enough zinc, it won't form that specific alloy.
It's not like you could just like take a hunk of this, a hunk of that, a hunk of that, heat it up,
if
and then it makes the alloy.
Yeah, if it's slightly too much copper, that alloy won't form.
And so this artifact that they're talking about is...
It's not an artifact. It's a whole meteorite made of this shit.
So, like, the entire thing is made of the alloy. There's not like the alloy and then some of this and then some of that.
In this instance, it's not a meteorite with these alloys. The whole meteorite right here is the alloy.
Okay.
So
it's not just parts of it as an alloy that like.
Right.
Okay, that makes more sense.
That's why the scientists even say it's a mystery.
I got you.
So we're gonna move to the 16th century, the Spanish conquistadors. You guys remember them? You've heard all about them in high school.
Yeah.
They came across the Spanish conquistadors. They came across an 18-centimeter iron nail. Oh, guys, this whole section is fantastic. An 18-centimeter iron nail, solidly encrusted in rock in a deep Peruvian mine. The rock is estimated to be tens of thousands of years old. Since iron was unknown to the American Indian until the conquest, one wonders whose nail was this. The Spanish viceroy, Don Francisco de Toledo, kept the mysterious nail in his study as a souvenir. This is recorded in the Madrid archives in a letter October 9th, 1572. According to the London Times on December 24th in 1851, Mr. Hiram de Witt found a piece of auriferous quartz. Auriferous means it contained gold. A piece of auriferous quartz in California. When he dropped it accidentally, an iron nail with a perfect head was found to be inside the quartz crystal. About the same time, Sir David Brewster made a report to the British Association for Advancement of Science, which created a sensation in the scientific community. A block of stone from Kingoodle Quarry in North Britain contained a nail, the end of which was corroded, but at least an inch of the nail, including the head, lay embedded in solid rock. Because of the great age of the geological strata where these three iron nails were found, the identity of their makers remains a mystery. It would have been hundreds of thousands of years ago, if we accept the uniformitarian dating. So in 1885, in the foundry of Isidor Braun of Vöcklabruck, Austria, a block of coal was broken. In a small steel cube, 67 millimeters by 47 millimeters, fell out of the coal. A deep incision ran around it, and the edges on two sides were rounded. Only human hands could have made such a device. The son of Braun took the artifact to the Linz Museum, but in the course of decades, the artifact became lost. Where have we heard that story before? How many unusual, unexplained parts have been taken to the Smithsonian Institution by American patriots thinking they were doing the right thing, only to find out that those artifacts were put on old derelict ships, wooden ships, sent out into the Atlantic and purposely sunk by the Smithsonian Institute. Yeah, how many times have we heard that story? Yeah, there are reports about the Smithsonian Institute destroying artifacts.
Destroying skeletons of giants and all kinds of stuff.
All that stuff. Especially though, all the things that were found in the Ohio mounds. Oh, small tangent. The Ohio mound building civilization, the mound builders, megafauna remains. Yeah, we're talking about mastodons, mammoths, three-toed sloths, giant saber-toothed tigers. Mammoth megafauna remains have been found strewn in the mounds with human skeletons. So that's a problem. That's a huge problem. It completely defies the Ice Age uniformitarian model of history. Okay, That was 1885. Artifact comes up missing. It's mentioned it's even mentioned that it was in the possession of the Lens Museum. They admit that they had it. Contemporary magazines such as Nature, which is one of the most prestigious scientific magazines ever, it even admitted that the artifact exists in the November 1886 issue. And El Astronomy, the Paris edition, 1887, also mentions the article. Now, this artifact was found in tertiary dated coal. Come on, guys. A technological artifact found in like 30 to 50,000 year old coal.
You said it was made of steel?
Yeah, it was made of iron or steel. Let's see.
So that's an important distinction, though.
Of course it is. Steel is very, very, very sophisticated.
Steel is an alloy and iron is not. Iron is a pure metal.
Right.
So if it's steel, then it's an alloy that was made.
Well, let me go look back, man. To me, it wasn't important because it's a human artifact found in coal strata dated at 30 to 50,000 years old. But let me see what it says here. Steel cube. There it is. A small steel cube.
Yeah,
so there it is.
Steel, yeah.
There it is. Another alloy. Good looking out, John. I knew that's why you got paid the big bucks.
When did I start making big bucks?
All right. Man, this road's bumpy.
Yeah. Which is weird because we're going like right through like an area.
Are we in New Mexico yet?
I haven't seen a sign that said it. But we're coming up on Gallup. I can't remember, is that Arizona or is that New Mexico?
I don't know, man, but Arizona and New Mexico needs to fix their highways. Ain't nothing in Texas like this.
This is the interstate, so the federal government needs to fix it.
Yeah, feds need to do something. Interstates in Texas are way better than this.
Yeah.
It's crazy. All right, moving on. So the scientific debate has never been closed. What they did is they shelved it. According to Andrew Tomas right here in the book, he basically said the scientific community refused to even discuss it any further. They shelved it. And this is what William Corliss, this is the value of William Corliss's research in the Source Book Project, books that are getting increasingly difficult to find. William Corliss documents all the nails and artifacts of human manufacture that have been found in strata that's been dated by the uniformitarian model to be impossible. Technologically sophisticated artifacts found in hundreds of thousands of year old strata. Now remember, guys, I have in my fossil videos, I have in 2 of my 3 fossil videos, I show you guys how uniformitarian dating is absolutely disproven by the fact that we have now found what are called polystrate fossils. And these are fossils that are found to extend between more than one layer of the geologic column. Remember, in uniformitarian dating, every single layer is given definitive dates. They call them Ordovician, they call them tertiary. The old ones are called Permian and pre-Permian and called Jurassic and Devonian. And listen, guys, this model was invented in the 1820s and 30s, and it was supported and financed in the 1840s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And anybody who opposed this model in the 1800s, they lost their funding and they could not get their books published. And you have a video describing just this. I'm going to show you some fantastic material in a video from 1853 where this guy is basically smashing, and he's a scientist, and he is smashing the whole Ice Age glaciation theory using their own data. Now, that's in a coming video that I've already prepared. But William Corliss has already, in the Source Book Project books, if you can get your hands on any of those Source Book Project books, you got to do it. I only have a few, but he's got like 12 books and you got to get them. He gives the actual photos and the illustrations of what these artifacts are. Hundreds of artifacts of technological sophistication found in strata that could never been found on, if that strata is truly dated at hundreds of thousands and hundreds of millions of years old. And polystrate fossils, like tree roots and trees that have been found going through as many as 20 layers of the geologic column. And when scientists have been asked by people in Texas who have found polystrate fossils, hey, what is this layer right here? And they tell him, oh, that right there is that's ancient basement rock. We know that right there is diorite. Oh, okay. What is that dated? Well, that's Permian Basin in Texas. We know that's 500 million years old. Oh, okay. So they take them a few acres away and say, hey, isn't that layer of Permian Basin? Yeah, that's Permian Basin. That's why all the small layers are on top of it. That's bedrock. Oh, okay. Well, let's go over here and look at this right here. Can you tell us what this is right here? Oh, that right there's Jurassic. There's your KT boundary right there. You see that little white line? That's the KT boundary. That's 65 million years ago. Something hit the Earth and created that little white line, and everything below it is Jurassic. And then look at everything below that's Triassic. These are the dinosaur ages, and above that we have Devonian and Ordovician, and then we get closer to the Holocene and the Tertiary. And listen, they got this shit bad, where they put these dates on there and shit. And then these same scientists shut the F up when they're showing, okay, what's this right here? And then they get educated by people in Glen Rose, Texas, who tell them, oh, since you don't know all of a sudden what this is, I'm going to tell you, this is a polystrate fossil. Yeah, this is a petrified tree. And I don't think this tree is 500 million years old. I don't think it took 500 million years old for these tree roots to penetrate all these layers of rock. Nope. I think this tree fossilized at the same time all these other fossils appeared in different layers. And I think all these layers are sediments from a diluvial cataclysm. That's what makes sense of the evidence. Because what doesn't make sense of the evidence is believing in that Precambrian, Triassic, Jurassic, KT boundary bullshit. Because when you believe that, you got to attach all these dates to that stuff. But that one polystrate fossil disproves all that. And it's not just one. We now have over 5,000 documented polystrate fossils. And they're not just trees. We have found fossils of animals now that extend between layers. So if there were sediments, that makes sense. The dead animal form drifts to the bottom. By density, different layers settle on the bottom. But a different layer is now settling, the creature's too big, and that's how we get a fossilized shark, like a megalodon that's in 4 different layers of strata. And a polystrate tree fossil in multiple layers. And the scientists, who are uniformitarians, can only chalk it up as mystery. And I'm going to tell you now, guys, when you study polystrate fossils, you're going to read some really ridiculous explanations. The main explanation, they're sticking to their guns. They're not going to change their shit, even though many scientists know that polystrate fossils disproves the dating of uniformitarianism. They're still going to stick to their guns. And they're going to say that, oh, wow, it's simple. It's simple. Over hundreds of millions of years, that fossilized tree has worked its way down through all those layers. Well, how come all the other fossils didn't do that? Yeah, they got an explanation for everything. Let's move on. You know what? We're going to take a break because
we need gas.
And Speedway, huh? Yeah, pull up to that pump. Take a short break and be right back. This video is far from over. So Andrew, he sums up that chapter really elegantly. I like what he says, so I'm going to go ahead and read it word for word. This was written in 1971 after a few chapters of just nothing but solid, just citation after citation after citation. I'm only paraphrasing these discoveries and these anomalies in the archaeological record. But you need to read the book if you want to go into a lot more detail. But he wrote this: these perplexities cannot be cleared up unless a reappraisal of prehistory is made. The facts assembled here point to the existence of a technology at what we have imagined to be the dawn of mankind. 2 theories can explain the artifacts described in this chapter. Either there was some kind of technological civilization in a bygone past, or the Earth has been visited by beings from other stellar worlds. Now, here is where I disagree with Andrew Tomas, because there's a third scenario that he did not mention. In that third scenario, because you got to understand, in order to make the two things in order to assert these two options, And let me give them to you again. That there was a technologically advanced civilization in the ancient past. He's talking about hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago. Or hundreds of thousands to millions of years ago, there was an alien species that visited our world. I'm sorry, but I apply Occam's razor, and that's not acceptable with me when there's a much simpler, there's a way simpler way to interpret all this data, and it's one that Andrew Thomas couldn't do. He couldn't do it because his own, the perimeters of his own education in 1960s when he was doing this research was within the false framework of the uniformitarian model. What is my whole channel promoting, guys? I tell you, there's only two models. The catastrophist model and the uniformitarian model. And if you go by the uniformitarian model and you're educated by the uniformitarian model, then that means you're going to interpret all the data as conforming to a uniformitarian concept. That's what he did here. So he was totally blind to the third option. And the third option is all these technologically advanced artifacts that we have found, all these alloys, all these traditions and myths that show that there was some type of technological infrastructure in the past. The third option is that these rock formations are not as old as we're told. The uniformitarian dating is off. Those fossilized sandal prints and boot prints are from 4,000 and 5,000 year old catastrophes, not 400 million year old rock strata. That's ridiculous. 400 million years is such a long period of time to imagine. How would a fossil not disintegrate? Whole cliff faces disintegrate into hillsides. Going here all around. John and I are looking all around us. Every single mountain around us, at the foot of it, has decomposed mountain. It's always in a ramp at the base of the mountain. Yeah, it's crazy.
You're looking at it right now.
Looking at it right now, everywhere. The third option didn't even come to Andrew Thomas's mind because he's been programmed to believe in the uniformitarian theory. So when they find human artifacts like hammers and axes and coal seams, they can't process the data because the coal seam's 250,000 years old, according to the uniformitarian model. Yeah, they can't process that a human femur, leg bone, and whole foot was found in Utah in solid quartzite. How's that possible? The quartzite is almost 5 million years old, according to the uniformitarian model. Yeah, guys, you got to read this book. Got to read this book.
Let me ask you a question real quick. So could it be a blend of both? All right. So could that quartzite be 5 million years old, but a catastrophe happened that causes a vibrational resonance that allows that bone in that foot, that femur in that foot, to travel down into it, and then that vibration stops and it gets stuck in there?
If that's the case, then the structuring would be noticeable, and those crystals wouldn't have 8 sides like they do. Now, what you're also asking me to do is accept many implausible scenarios when there's a very simple mechanism available for us to interpret.
Okay. So it's like, I mean, basically Occam's razor.
Occam's razor.
Like, I have to accept so many more things
in order
for that to be the truth.
Yeah.
When there's a much simpler explanation.
I can easily just say that, okay, obviously, if there's a human femur and a foot bone in solid quartzite, then obviously the quartzite isn't 200 million years old. Obviously, there's been a dating problem. Now, we can shelve that like uniformitarians do. We can shelve that in a museum and forget about it. But the problem is we have thousands of other human artifacts like hammers in Glen Rose, Texas, that have been found encased in solid rock. We have metal thimbles, needles, nails, pots. We even have a bell. Right here, a bell in Iowa that was found when an old woman took a coal block and dropped it in a silver bell inlaid with iron, popped out of the coal. but we're told the coal took hundreds of thousands of years to form. The problem isn't the artifacts. The problem isn't where the artifacts are found. The problem is that in the 1820s, some asshole decided to date all this stuff at hundreds of thousands and hundreds of millions of years old, when a flood 5,000 years ago can account for all the layers. A single flood, a single impact event that caused flooding can account for all the anomalies, and how human cadavers were fossilized, human bones have been found in solid rock, and how hundreds of thousands of life forms were all found the way they're found. One phenomenon, a catastrophe, and everything that followed that catastrophe 6 to 8 weeks later can account for all the anomalies. Instead, we're given this hyperinflated geological timeline chart, which required manipulation to sell to the public. That's what you got to understand, guys. This model wasn't accepted by scientists of the day. In the 1820s, there was only two schools of thought: uniformitarians and the catastrophists. But even the uniformitarian theory wasn't even taken seriously by anybody, and nor had the uniformitarian theory even been developed to the point where people were thinking that anything was older than 50,000 years. Yeah, people were still thinking the Earth was super young. Uniformitarian theory came around 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, and any scientist who didn't get on board found out that he couldn't get published. Yeah, guys. So let's move on. The tomb of the Chinese general Chao Chu in 265 to 316 Anno Domini, that's our calendar, presents a genuine mystery. When analyzed by the spectroscope, a metal girdle found in the Chinese tomb shows 10% copper, 5% manganese. How you say that, man?
I can't see.
Manganese?
Yeah, manganese.
And 85% pure aluminum. But according to the history of science, aluminum was obtained for the first time by Oersted in the year 1825. What? 1825? That's only 200 years ago. Aluminum is produced by a chemical method. A chemical method produced aluminum in 1825, but they found it in an ancient Chinese tomb. So we have a problem. It's a genuine mystery. How do they explain this mystery? I'm going to tell you. Scientists don't. They ignore it. They absolutely ignore those findings, guys. And that's a problem for Archaix, because we're not trying to hear it. We already know and have shown the data all through the Archaix material that there has been a technologically advanced civilization in this world. And for those of you who want to educate yourself anymore, go to Jonathan Gray's website, beforeus.com, and read the articles, look at all the pictures. Technologically advanced artifacts have been found all over the world in all different strata. There was not, listen guys, there's like 50 layers in the geologic column, and each one of them have a date. There was not 50 different technologically advanced civilizations in the ancient past dated to all these different dates. That's not what it is. That's the uniformitarian model, and it doesn't work. But by the catastrophist model, there was one technologically advanced civilization in the ancient past, and it was broken in a cataclysm, and the cataclysm basically in a flood. And what does a flood do? Waters distribute everything everywhere, and by weight and density. This is why the coal seams have all the metal. The ancient metallic artifacts are found in the coal seams. Yeah, we've got William Corliss Sourcebook Project, beforeus.com, the Archaix material, handbook of puzzling artifacts. There's so many. There at Barry Fell, America, BC. There are so many sources. David Hatcher Childress mentions a bunch of them. Of all the metal artifacts that have been found in coal seams. Why? Because in a cataclysm, when all that happens, that metal goes to the bottom first. Then the sediments, by weight and density, all settle. Then the weight, compression, it creates heat. Things are burned into place. whole forests become polystrate fossils, one tree having multiple layers. But according to the uniformitarians, all those multiple layers are hundreds of millions of years. So that's a whole tree. Of course, I'm being facetious. So, we have some interesting texts from the old world that Mr. Tomas wants to educate us on. And one of them is a 5th century BC text called the Sashruta, where it lists the diagnoses 1,120 diseases. This text describes 121 surgical instruments, and this text is the first to mention experimentation with plastic surgery 25 centuries ago. Wow, here's another text. Sakya Grantham, a Brahmin book from India, compiled about 1500 BC. That's 3,500 years ago. It contains the following passage giving instructions on smallpox vaccination. It says, take on the tip of a knife the contents of the inflammation, inject it into the arm of a man, mixing it with his blood. A fever will follow, but the malady will pass very easily and will create no complications. This is an ancient Sanskrit text. What? Let's see. Let's move on. Now, this is 3,500 years ago, but modern day vaccination began by Edward Jenner in 1749 to 1823 AD. He's credited with the discovery of vaccination, but it appears that the ancient India has the prior claim. I just find that really interesting. I actually find it super interesting. So, guys, we are not the first. Andrew Tomas. This is only the first video. Part 2 is going to be uploaded right after this video. You're getting 2 videos today about this book. We're not putting it in one video. It'd be too long. We still have a lot more to discuss. If you guys don't know, we're going to be talking about the mysterious Saint Germain. The man who lived for centuries and knew every language in ancient Europe, visited all the courts of Europe. They say he knew the secret to the fountain of youth, the art of transmutation, the secret of the philosopher's stone. Yeah, guys, we're going to be talking about him in part 2, but we're also going to be talking about more archaeological anomalies, very advanced scientific knowledge in the ancient world, more very interesting discoveries, parts, things that don't make sense. We're going to go deeper than we went in the first video in examining this book and showing that, listen, Zecharia Sitchin copied a lot of this guy's material in the Earth Chronicles. David Hatcher Childress cited this guy numerous times and his sources. Yeah, his sources are fantastic. This book was written before those guys came out. Yeah. We have a lot more ground to cover, and we're going to do it on some amazing stuff in part 2 of this video. So this is Jason and who?
John.
Big John. And we're gonna get working on the second video right now.